we're ready to get started. So thank you all for attending the AI-powered Data Intelligent Wealth Advisor webinar. So just a quick introduction. My name is Matt Lucas. I'm a field CTO here at Stardog. And today we are going to demonstrate the Stardog platform in the context of a wealth advisor. Specifically, Stardog is a company that is rooted in knowledge graph technology, but also enables that technology through a very powerful Gen AI capability called Voicebox. So I'll give a little bit of information about Stardog, about our capabilities, and we'll also go through a demonstration of the full platform today. As you have questions, feel free to ask those in our chat window. The team will answer those as we go through the webinar, and we'll spend some time at the very end also addressing any questions that come up throughout. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So to begin, the way we see the industry in terms of leveraging data in financial services is that the winners are going to be those that really empower the knowledge workers with data and AI. And what does that mean? How do we take information that is available to organizations and make it more accessible and leverageable to make good business decisions? In particular, in wealth management, it is a very client-facing effort in that you need to work with individuals, families, businesses, and help them manage their wealth effectively. So giving that information to the wealth advisor, making it more accessible, more usable, is really going to help enable those individuals, give a better client experience to their customers, putting the knowledge of experts at their fingertips. So the challenge today is that information is difficult to obtain in very large organizations. Costs of technology, lack of data and AI skills are prevalent throughout the industry, and both within the IT organizations and on the business organizations, there are challenges. From an IT perspective, financial services data is often fragmented. It exists in many different databases, data lakes, many different locations, and it's often difficult to find the information that's necessary to give to the business users to make key decisions and identify opportunities for clients. From a business perspective, accessing that data is often timely. It takes oftentimes report writers, engagements with information technology to get that information, and it's not available at your fingertips. So how do we take advantage of the Gen AI revolution and really bring that information forward to the business users so they can make use of that information more effectively? So we see it in three different ways in terms of the outcomes and how do we unlock that puzzle, what is the data puzzle, excuse me. So connected data in particular, how do we access all the relevant data without moving it or copying it? Oftentimes firms will take information from various sources and try to pull that into one location using ETL technology, things like Informatica and things of that nature. It's a very costly, time-intensive process, and oftentimes it takes a long time to get that data into a format where it can be leveraged. In addition to that, how is the data meaningful? How do we make it understandable and not necessarily looking at cryptic column names or database structures to try to understand your information and make it leverageable? And how do we also make that accessible? So not all users have access or the ability to query databases directly. So we want to make that accessible to the end user so that they can both be more productive, shorten their time to market, and really help them uncover new streams of revenue for your business organization. So Stardog leverages our best-of-breed knowledge graph technology, which Gartner recognizes as a high-impact technology that really does power Gen AI capabilities. Now, this is a technology that is getting a lot of interest in the space, and we have many competitors trying to solve the challenge, but we feel we have a very unique proposition in how we go about our solution. Knowledge graphs are an appropriate target for LLMs because they provide large language models, the structure necessary to represent that data to their end users in a very clear and concise way. So leveraging knowledge graphs in conjunction with Gen AI capabilities really gives that power to the wealth advisor so they can make those key information decisions. All right. Now, before we get into the business demo, I do want to talk just briefly about some of the technology. So knowledge graphs can power deep data insights by providing three main features. First, a semantic model is a readable, business understandable structure of the data, and it's a flexible abstraction for pulling all this information that's available in your organization and putting it in business understandable language. Establishing a semantic model, and also by leveraging and pulling the information from your databases using something called federated querying, allows organizations to use the data in place rather than having to copy it and clone it into one structure, a very expensive and time-intensive process. Once the data is in a good structure in a knowledge graph, we also introduce capabilities around data inferencing, something I'll speak to a little bit more during our demo. But this really allows organizations to uncover deep insights in the data, especially in connected data, to be able to ask more advanced and particular questions, as well as answer broad questions that seem simple, but have quite a bit of information underneath. Expanding a bit on the tech radar, we see that Gen AI is also high on the impact radar for 2024, according to Gartner, just really emphasizing that we feel that combining both Gen AI capabilities with knowledge graphs is one way that organizations can really get the value out of the latest technologies that are on the market. Now, you often hear of the Gen AI models that are available, things like ChatGPT. There's various models that are out there, and some of them do a good job in providing information. But one of the challenges with these models is they don't always do it in an accurate way. And something that we call hallucination often presents itself in the sense that if you ask a question of a model, it's going to do its best to answer that based off of the information that was provided. But oftentimes that answer is not correct, even though it may sound correct, and that's called hallucinations. So to solve this for regulated industries, it's really important for businesses to provide the right guardrails, provide traceability of the responses so you can show how those responses were generated, as well as providing the right context. And our technology and our knowledge graph solution allow that to be defined so that these organizations can take advantage of Gen AI capability. So with that, I'd like to present Stardog Voicebox, which is our solution to the conversational data platform. And with Stardog Voicebox, anyone can ask any question about data and get a timely, accurate, and explainable answer from that question. So we combine our capability in enterprise knowledge graphs and combine that with our generative AI capability that takes natural language and converts natural language to a query language that talks to our knowledge graph. So your responses are produced from natural language and pulled directly from your data sources. This is very unique, and it's a different approach from many others in that we're not training models to provide responses. We're training models to take that language and navigate the knowledge graph. Very different approach, but it's rooted in your data and it's fully explainable, fully traceable. In the case of financial services, this is very important to explain to regulators how responses are generated. Moving on. A couple other industries that we see this capability unlocking quite a bit of value are in healthcare and life sciences in the form of preclinical and clinical research and development, 360 view on patients, supply chain visibility, as well as introducing concepts such as digital twin, supply chain visibility in retail manufacturing, and specifically in banking and insurance, the wealth management demonstration, which we'll go through here in a moment, as well as back office functions such as operational risk, compliance, fraud detection, KYC concerns, as well as other credit risk concerns that may come up in the industry. All these can be unlocked with our technology, our knowledge graph capability, and providing those analysts information and key details that they can act on through our Gen AI capability. So let's focus a bit on the topic at hand today, the wealth advisor. So Stardog Voicebox in the financial services industry can help three different personas in our typical use case. So first, financial advisors. We can provide them a quick, fast way to get knowledge and information to their clients so they can make key decisions or enlightened decisions based off of the information available at the firm. Prospective clients, with our capability, we'll be able to navigate and search and identify potential products or offerings from a financial institution that could be offered. So in cases where clients may not be working directly with an advisor, perhaps the technology could be provided as a client offering so they could do research on their own, leveraging the capability. And finally, but most certainly not least, bank executives and senior leaders who want a better view of the risks of products or information within their businesses and how they can leverage that information to make better decisions going forward. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead into a quick demo of Stardog and the Stardog suite. So to start, I'm going to log into our Stardog Cloud platform. And Stardog is comprised of four main products. The first product is called Stardog Designer. This is where a user would define what's called the data model or ontology. It's essentially a map of your organization, and it's a no-code visual environment where you can model and connect that model to your data sources in your environment. We'll do a quick demo of Designer and show how that power is unlocked. Pulling information from data lakes, relational databases, common structures such as Snowflake and Databricks, and other common technologies. Our Stardog Explorer tool is a visual way to explore data that's in the graph and exposed perhaps through a voice box question. So if you would like to take a deeper look into information and other connected details around that information, our Explorer tool provides a robust way to navigate that. For our power users, we provide a full-fledged development environment. It's called Stardog Studio. So within Stardog Studio, advanced users are able to create very advanced queries to ask deep questions that maybe go a bit beyond Designer Explorer. So for today's demo, we won't speak too much about Studio. We'll stick with Designer Explorer and demonstrate Voicebox. And finally, but certainly not least, is Stardog Voicebox. And Voicebox is our GenAI capability that sits on top of the knowledge graph. And in our case, we have a data set that we've defined today specifically around mutual funds. And the idea here is that how do we create a solution that will help wealth advisors when they're speaking with prospective clients, organizations, and how they can deploy investment dollars most effectively? So to do this, we pulled public information from some common providers, Fidelity, T. Rowe Price, BlackRock, and we have some questions that we're going to ask this data set about those funds and perhaps some other information that may be relevant. And we'll tie that into the components of Stardog as well to show how the whole solution works together. So our first example that we're going to ask is we're curious about what particular funds are available in our data set from Fidelity and T. Rowe Price, two common providers of this product line, and information that would be a good starting point for a client who may know particular organizations where they want to start their search. So within Voicebox, we have the ability to save commonly asked questions. So you notice that I have 5 examples that are loaded here. And if you click on those questions, it will automatically populate the text box and execute the search. And in our case here, we see that for the question, what funds are available from Fidelity and T. Rowe Price, 15 funds come back with some key information about the fund. So you'll notice that we have information about the fund name, as well as some other basic information such as the provider. So in this case, we have several from T. Rowe Price, a few from Fidelity. And in this case, we showed just the top 10 results, but we have the ability to download the full data set in a CSV form. So if you want to pull a lot of information, let's say that instead of 15 funds, you have 150 or 1,000 funds, we're going to show the top identified hits in this case, but you do have the ability to pull down the full data set. So if you'd like to dive into that in more detail, you can absolutely do that. So typically with a Voicebox interaction, it doesn't stop with one question. You may have one question that leads to additional follow-up questions. And in this case, we may want to know a little bit more information about, let's say, T. Rowe Price funds, but in particular, we want to know what funds are more exposed in information technology. So example 2 is going to ask that exact question. So show me T. Rowe Price options in the information technology sector. And in this case, what Voicebox is doing is taking that question, converting it into computer code that is going to talk to the knowledge graph, bring back those results, convert it back into natural language response, and here's the reply that we got. So in our data set, we see that there are 3 particular funds that meet this criteria, and the criteria really means that these funds have equities or stocks that are tied specifically to organizations that are defined as information technology. In this case, we have 3. We have an opportunities fund, we have a blue chip growth fund, as well as we have a tax efficient equity fund. Okay. Now, let's say I want to take a deeper look at these funds and maybe identify some additional information. So in Voicebox, these entities or items that come back are clickable. So I can click and get some additional information. Today, what it will do is it will take you to our Stardog Explorer product. So for instance, if I click PREFX, it will open up a new tab. It will launch our Stardog Explorer tool, and it's going to present this fund and any related information to the fund in a visual way. So for someone who's curious about the fund and would like to see what's related to it, I can see that the fund is at the middle and it's tied to 9 specific board members. If you click on the bubble, you can get some information about that. And you can zoom in and zoom out. It's really just a visual way to present the information. But if I right click on the fund, I can see the additional details about the fund, such as asset allocation details. We can see board membership information. We have officer information. So really anything that you'd want to know about the fund is defined as metadata in this particular class. If I'm curious about a particular attribute on this class, let's say, for instance, we see an officer that we'd like to learn a little bit more about, we can click and learn a little bit more information about that officer. In this case, Kate Hobbs is an officer tied to 3 funds in our data set. So in addition to this one fund, she's also an officer defined on 2 additional funds in our data set. So you can do deeper exploration with Explorer. There's a lot more capability in Explorer, but for today's purpose, this is what we'll show for now. Okay. Now, coming back to Voicebox, moving on to an additional question, I would like to take a deeper look at an officer in particular. So in this case, J.M. Fife. So I'm going to execute example 4, which is going to ask the question again of this individual, and it's saying what funds are listed, what funds is J.M. Fife listed as an officer? So by running this question, I see that there are 3 particular funds that come back. And maybe, for instance, you see that information, but you're not quite sure how that was generated. So within Stardog Voicebox for advanced users, we have the ability to take a look at how this was actually generated. So if I click on the menu option next to the question, I can ask Voicebox to explain how this was produced, really identifying and showing how we can route this information down to the specific query and question that was asked. So if a regulator, for instance, comes and asks about the particular question that was generated and how that was done, we have the full ability to show exactly how this was produced. And for those technical users on the phone, we can also see the actual query that was generated. So the natural language is converted into that computer code that pulls the data from your organization. Very key distinguishing factor from us and our competitors in that we route the responses in your data. Okay, moving on, I'd like to show just a little bit about our Stardog Designer tool. So to stand up this capability, first you have to model or pull in information in your organization to power Voicebox. And to do that, we use a technology called Stardog Designer, which is a graphical interface that allows you to define your data model and connect the data sources to that model. So in our case, everything is rooted in a mutual fund for the demo. And those mutual funds are comprised of stocks and bonds, which can also be tied to publicly held companies, to locations in the form of a municipal bond for a bond, or through an incorporated location for a publicly held company. So as you see this information, you can start to see how mutual funds can relate to the elements that comprise them, as well as deeper elements that may be of interest for deeper analysis of your data sources. So before we get into some of the capabilities around data inferencing and those deep analyses, let's take a look at how we pulled the data in. So for stocks, in our example, we leverage a Databricks instance that's populated with all stock information. And if I preview this, I can see a very quick preview of the information that we're sourcing for this demonstration. And this information is mapped to the Stardog knowledge graph. So when you ask questions of a particular fund about a stock, what we're actually doing is we're actually querying the Databricks instance. So you don't need to clone the data. You don't need to set up ETL functions or move that information. We're able to query that in place, which is a very powerful feature and allows a very fast time to market. We support over 150 types of sources. And just to show you a few that we support out of the box, Snowflake, Databricks are very common data lake platforms and relational database platforms that are used. And we're seeing several others that are being used frequently. Trino, for instance, is gaining popularity in the SQL spaces, as well as common platforms in Amazon, Athena, Redshift, as well as 150 other sources that we are able to configure for use. Okay. One other element I'd like to describe is a capability called inferencing. Now, inferencing is very powerful in that when you define a knowledge graph, you have a structure that's defined of nodes and edges. So funds can tie to stocks in the form of an equity instrument, or a fund can tie to a bond in the form of a tradable debt instrument. Okay. Now, let's say, for instance, I'm curious about the funds that are exposed to a particular location. And in our example, let's say California. So to do that, I would have to navigate a hierarchy. So for instance, for this mutual fund, or for a mutual fund, I can see that bonds could comprise or be included in a fund. Those bonds may be municipal entity, may be tied to a municipal entity in the form of a municipal bond, which in form are incorporated in a particular location, in our example, a state. So let's go ahead and define a rule that says funds with California exposure. And using our graphical interface, we're able to define these business rules that we can then use Voicebox to allow the advisor to ask those more advanced questions. So in this case, a mutual fund is defined as fund with California exposure if it has any bonds that are tied to a municipal entity that is located in California. And in this case, we infer or conclude that the mutual fund is classified as a California exposed fund if it meets this business rule. Okay. Now, why this is important is that if we go back to Voicebox, we're able to ask a question in Voicebox of that inference rule. So for example, 5, we have that question defined. What funds are currently California exposed funds? So what Stardog is doing here is it's taking advantage of the inference rule, that deep data analysis, that deep rule, and it's pulling that information back. So where this becomes very powerful is if you have many types of these deep questions, such as what funds have exposure to California, or what funds have exposure to a particular location or particular industry, such as oil and gas or information technology. And you can combine additional elements such as location and performance. So what fund is performing the best, but also has a percentage performance of 20, or excuse me, a sector exposure in information technology of 25% or greater. So you can add in many different rules to make this extremely robust, extremely powerful, and give the wealth advisor that capability to ask those advanced questions. Okay. One final thing I'd like to demonstrate before we get to some questions is Stardog itself is very powerful in the sense that it exposes Gen AI capabilities, fully hallucination-free, fully traceable, but we can also leverage Stardog as a BI platform. So when data is modeled in our graph, we have the ability to expose links out to Power BI and integrate with Tableau and other common BI platforms. So in our example here, we actually have one particular fund in our data set, PRWAX, and we have a report that we've defined in Power BI called an AI advisory report. And just a really sample view of this, nothing really too fancy here, but showing that we're able to pull that information that we modeled in our knowledge graph, again, using your data from various sources in one location and create robust reporting. So if that's a need for your organization, in addition to Voicebox, you have the ability to create reports on top of this platform as well. Okay. So in conclusion, Stardog is a very powerful platform in the sense that the knowledge graph capability combined with Gen AI provides a full-fledged data fabric that allows you to access your information, make it easy to understand, and give your end users, the people on the ground, the people generating revenue, those advisors working behind the scenes to prevent risk for your firm, the information they need to make key business decisions. Okay. So with that, I'm going to pause and thank you all for attending. I do want to also recognize that we have a winner of the Amazon gift card. So for those of you who attended, thank you very much. By your attendance, you were able to essentially be qualified into that drawing. And the grand prize winner is Chris Salaba of Charles Schwab. So Chris, You'll get an email from Jasmeet after the webinar with a link to your $100 Amazon gift card. So thank you for your time today, and we look forward to catching up with you after that as well. So to conclude, my information is available. So you can contact me at matt.lucas@stardog.com if you have any questions about the webinar, our wealth management solutions, as well as any of our financial services solutions, and how you can leverage Stardog Voicebox and our best of breed knowledge graph capabilities in your organization. With that, we do have one question. So let me go ahead and take a look at that. So Will, I see you put that in the window here. I don't see the question on the chat. Do you mind providing that in the chat window there, Will? And I'll go ahead and respond. All right, well, there we go. Okay, so the question, what is the process for getting an environment to explore? Excellent question. So if you go to cloud.stardog.com, we have the ability for standing up a free instance of Stardog Cloud. So you can start to navigate and explore the capabilities of Stardog, understand what it can bring for your organization. We provide, it is a limited demonstration, so you can obviously work with the technology and understand what it can provide. But if you want to learn a little bit more about some more advanced capabilities, perhaps launch proof of value in your organization, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help with that process and really enable your organization on leveraging the Stardog capabilities.